My wife took our SONS college fund and ran off with her boyfriend. Then the unthinkable happened. You won't believe what happened when my ex-wife wiped out our son's college fund and ran off with her boyfriend. I thought I had everything under control until I found out the truth. The shocking betrayal that came next left me questioning everything I knew about trust. Stay tuned to see how far I had to go to uncover the reality and the dangerous road I walked to get justice. I never expected that a normal Wednesday morning would unravel everything I had worked so hard to build. The sun was filtering through the tall windows of my apartment in downtown Chicago, casting long shadows across the room. The city buzzed quietly beneath me, busy, alive, yet almost peaceful in its own way. There was a calm to the morning, the kind that comes with routine, with stability. I sat in my home office, sipping my coffee and scrolling through emails, occasionally glancing at the stock market, my usual day. Josh, my 15-year-old son, was in the kitchen, his laptop open in front of him, headphones on, his quiet typing filling the space around us. It was just another day. A boring, ordinary day, just the way I liked it. Since the divorce 2 years ago, I'd made a promise to myself, to Josh, that no matter what, I would provide stability. We didn't need a mansion or fancy things, we just needed to be okay. I'd worked hard for that. Every decision, every dollar, carefully allocated, saved. The college fund for Josh was the crown jewel of my sacrifices. I remember talking to Rachel back when we were still together, both of us agreeing that this was sacred, that fund would only ever be used for Josh's future. We couldn't afford to screw it up. We couldn't afford to fail him. And we made that promise. Together. I leaned back in my chair, eyes tired from too much screen time, and stared out the window for a moment. I let myself think about the future. Josh's future. I pictured him walking across a stage, a diploma in hand, heading off to some university to study engineering, the dream he'd held onto for as long as I could remember. That's why I had sacrificed so much. So that he could have a better start than I did. So that he could have choices. Then, out of nowhere, the calm shattered. I heard my phone chime, a soft buzz against the silence. It was a notification from my bank. Nothing unusual, or so I thought. But when I opened the app and saw the message, "Your account balance is critically low," my heart dropped straight into my stomach. I blinked. Surely, it was a mistake, a glitch. I tapped the screen again, hoping for some miracle fix. But it was no glitch. The number on the screen stayed frozen. A six-figure number I'd worked so hard to build was gone. I felt my breath catch, a knot tightening in my chest. The college fund, it was gone. Completely gone. I stared at the empty balance, my mind racing to figure out what the hell had just happened. I glanced over at Josh. He was still typing away, oblivious to the storm building inside me. "Josh," I called out, but my voice didn't feel like mine, thin, shaky. I forced the words out, trying to keep calm. "Hold on a sec." "Yeah, Dad?" His voice came from the kitchen, distant, not a care in the world. I stepped away from my desk, my legs feeling like they might buckle beneath me, and walked into the kitchen. He was hunched over his work, his face lit by the soft glow of his screen. A kid with his head in the clouds, just like I was at his age. I tried to make my voice steady. "We need to talk for a second." He barely looked up, just nodded and muttered something about needing to finish this assignment. I felt the weight of the moment, the crushing weight of betrayal and confusion. This wasn't just a financial hit. This was everything I had promised Josh, everything I'd worked for, swept away in an instant. I didn't want to tell him yet. He was just a kid. What was I going to say? "Hey buddy, your future's been wiped out by your mom." No. That couldn't be the first conversation we had about this. I didn't know what to do. I went back to my desk, hands shaking as I picked up my phone again. I called the bank's customer service, trying to sound calm, but the words didn't come out right. It felt like I was trapped in some bad dream, trying to wake up. But nothing was changing. The hold music played, a monotonous, tinny sound that felt like it was mocking me. It was endless. Finally, someone picked up. "I'm sorry, sir," the agent said. "There's no issue on our end. The transaction was authorized. There's nothing we can do." "What do you mean there's nothing you can do?" I could feel the anger rising in me, but I swallowed it down. This wasn't the time. I needed answers. I needed Rachel. I dialed her number. Straight to voicemail. I tried again. Same thing. Voicemail. I texted her. Call me. Urgent. No reply. The silence settled over me like a heavy fog, and a sinking feeling gnawed at me. I tried again. Nothing. 3 times, and then, nothing. Not a word. That's when the sickening truth hit me. I opened the joint account details. And there it was, Rachel's name, logged in just before the transaction was made. I stared at the screen. The cold certainty sank into my bones. She had done this. She had taken it. Every last dollar of Josh's future. It was her. She'd used her credentials, and she'd emptied the account. I didn't want to believe it. How could she? Why? But the facts were right there, staring back at me. I could feel my blood start to boil, but I couldn't think straight. I was caught in this whirlwind of disbelief, anger, and confusion. I couldn't breathe, couldn't process it. She had always been so careful with money, too careful. Sometimes, but this was different. This was betrayal on a whole new level. Why? What had happened to her? I dialed her again. The call rang through, but straight to voicemail, again. I hung up before the beep. I tried again. Same result. This wasn't normal. Rachel was always in control. Always. And now she was just gone. Without a word, I slammed the phone down onto the desk. My mind was racing. What the hell was going on? Why was she doing this? And where the hell was she? I heard Josh's footsteps behind me. Soft. Hesitant. Dad? Everything okay? His voice broke through the fog of my thoughts. But I couldn't focus on him just yet. Yeah, I forced out. Just some bank stuff. Don't worry about it. But it wasn't just bank stuff. It was everything. The promise I had made to Josh, the life we were building together, it was all crumbling. And I didn't know what to do next. I couldn't just sit there anymore. I had to do something. My mind was spinning, going 1,000 miles an hour, but I couldn't seem to get a clear thought. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about everything. It was about Rachel. About the trust we had held. About the trust I thought we still had. I kept thinking back to all those late nights when we sat together, planning Josh's future, talking about how we were going to make it all work. It was supposed to be our legacy for him. And now, in one cold, heartless move, Rachel had ripped that all away. She took everything I had worked for, everything I had promised Josh. I could feel the weight of the betrayal pressing down on me with every second that passed. But I couldn't let myself go down that road, not yet. I had to get answers. The problem was, I couldn't figure out where to even begin. I called Rachel again, this time with my hands shaking as I dialed. Her voicemail again. I left a message, trying to keep my voice calm, though it was barely controlled. Rachel, we need to talk. Call me back, now. I hung up, but it didn't make me feel any better. She wasn't going to answer. I knew that now. She was avoiding me, hiding from me. Why? What was she afraid of? I tried to calm myself down. I tried to focus. Josh was still in the other room, probably working on some school project. He didn't know what was happening, and I wasn't ready to tell him yet. Not like this. He didn't need to carry this weight, not yet. But I couldn't shake the feeling that he knew something. He was acting different this morning, not like his usual self. I knew he was a quiet kid, but today, there was something off. The way he was pacing around, the way he kept glancing at his phone. I didn't want to confront him about it yet. I needed to figure out what to do first. I turned back to the bank account, refreshing the page again. It was like staring at the face of a stranger. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe it wasn't Rachel. Maybe someone had hacked the account. I tried to tell myself that there had to be some explanation. But every time I looked at that empty balance, I knew the truth. Rachel had done this. I should have known. She had always been so careful with money, so frugal. But this was a betrayal on a level I wasn't prepared for. I grabbed my phone again. But instead of dialing Rachel's number, I found myself calling the bank. I needed some kind of confirmation. I needed someone to explain to me that this was all a mistake. That this was some kind of error. But I already knew it wasn't. I could feel it deep down in my gut. This wasn't a mistake. The wait on hold felt like an eternity. My mind raced with questions, so many questions I didn't have answers for. How long had she been planning this? How long had she been taking money from the account without me knowing? My blood was boiling as the hold music continued to play in my ear. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. I had to stay calm. I had to stay focused. This wasn't about me anymore. It was about Josh. Finally, a voice came through the line, breaking the tension. "Thank you for holding, sir. How may I assist you?" The voice was cheerful, polite, and I hated it. It felt so out of place, so disconnected from the storm that was raging inside me. "Yeah, I've been trying to figure out what happened with my account. It's been drained. The balance is zero," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I need to know what happened to the money. It's my son's college fund, and it's gone." The woman on the other end of the line hesitated for a moment, before responding. "I'm sorry to hear that, sir. I can help you look into this. Let me just pull up the details for you." I could hear her typing, and in that moment, I couldn't help but feel like I was on the edge of something bigger than I could comprehend. Every second that ticked by, I could feel my pulse racing faster. She came back a moment later. "There doesn't seem to be any unusual activity on the account. All of the transactions appear to have been authorized by the account holder. I'm afraid I don't have any further details." "Authorized by the account holder?" I felt a lump rise in my throat. "What do you mean authorized by the account holder?" "The account was in both of our names. My ex-wife was the only one who could have accessed it." My stomach dropped. "Well, sir," she continued, "it appears that the withdrawal was made by Rachel Keegan, and there's no indication that it was unauthorized." I could barely process what she was saying. It was like a slap in the face. Rachel. She had taken everything. I couldn't breathe. My hands were shaking as I ended the call. What was I supposed to do now? I sat there for a long time, staring at the screen. The silence in the room was deafening. I didn't know what I was more angry at. The fact that she had taken the money, or the fact that she wasn't even willing to talk to me about it. I tried calling her again, but this time, I didn't even leave a message. I just stared at the phone in my hand, unable to make sense of anything. I tried calling a few more people, mutual friends, her parents. Nobody had any answers. I felt like I was chasing shadows, like nobody had any idea where she had gone, what she was doing. It wasn't like her to disappear like this. She was always the responsible one, the reliable one. But now, she was a stranger. I couldn't stay in that apartment anymore. I had to get out, even if it was just for a little while. I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside, not really knowing where I was going. I just needed air. I needed space to think. The city was busy as usual, people rushing around, not even noticing the weight of the world on my shoulders. I wanted to scream at them all. Didn't they see what was happening? But instead, I just kept walking. When I got back home a few hours later, I was no closer to an answer. But there was something different. Josh wasn't at his laptop anymore. He was pacing around, looking at his phone. He was acting strange, like he knew something was wrong. I didn't know if he was old enough to understand the full gravity of what was going on. But I knew something was up. I couldn't put it off any longer. "Josh," I said, my voice tight. "We need to talk." He looked up from his phone, surprised, but didn't say anything. He just walked over to where I was sitting. There was that familiar silence between us, and for the first time, I didn't know what to say. "Dad, what's going on?" he asked, his voice quiet but full of concern. I took a deep breath, trying to hold it together. "I don't know, buddy. But I need you to listen carefully. Something's happened with your college fund. It's gone." He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "I kind of figured," he said, his voice softer than I expected. My heart stopped. "What do you mean you figured?" I asked, surprised. He hesitated, then slowly reached for his laptop. "I was trying to figure out where it went. I've been looking into it." I stared at him, unable to process what he was saying. "Josh, what the hell are you talking about?" "I didn't want to tell you, but I thought maybe I could help," he said, pulling up something on his laptop. "I found some weird transactions. There's this name, Victor. I think he's the one who took the money." My head was spinning. This couldn't be real. My 15-year-old son, had been investigating this on his own, had been tracking the money that Rachel had taken. I didn't know whether to be proud of him, or terrified for him. Either way, I knew one thing for sure, I couldn't do this alone anymore. We were in this together now. I didn't know where this was going. I didn't know what kind of trouble we were about to walk into. But I did know one thing. I wasn't going to let Rachel get away with this. I couldn't. Not when Josh's future was on the line. Not when my trust had been shattered into a million pieces. Whatever it took, we were going to find the truth. And we were going to get it back. Just when I thought I had everything figured out, the shocking twist happened. What if I wasn't the only one being betrayed? What if the person I trusted the most was hiding something far darker? Do you think I should confront her now, or wait for solid proof? Comment 1 if you think it's time for action. Comment 2 if you believe we need to dig deeper. The truth is coming, don't miss it. I was in too deep now. There was no turning back. My mind raced, trying to make sense of everything. Josh had just shown me. Victor. The name hit me like a ton of bricks. I had no idea who this guy was, but I knew one thing for sure. He was somehow involved in everything. Rachel, the missing money, the mysterious transactions, there was a connection. And I needed to know what the hell it was. Josh sat across from me, eyes locked on the laptop screen, fingers flying over the keys as he clicked through the data. I watched him, still trying to process what he just said. My 15-year-old son had been investigating this. He'd been digging into something that was way over his head. But he'd found something, and for the first time in what felt like forever, there was a sliver of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could piece this together before it was too late. Who is this guy, Victor? I asked, my voice hoarse, barely above a whisper. Where did you even find his name? Josh didn't look up from the screen. It was in the transaction records. I checked some old stuff from Mom's accounts, and his name kept popping up. I don't think it's a coincidence. He glanced at me, his face set with determination. I'm telling you, Dad, this guy is important. Important? I could feel my pulse quicken. Everything I'd built was falling apart around me, and now there was this Victor guy. Some stranger who I didn't know. Some piece of the puzzle that didn't fit yet. But Josh was right, this wasn't a coincidence. There was a pattern here, and Rachel had been involved. Whether she knew it or not. She'd dragged us into something way beyond anything I'd ever imagined. I leaned in, trying to get a closer look at the screen. Josh had pulled up a bunch of transaction details, dates, amounts, and a trail of digital breadcrumbs that I couldn't make heads or tails of. But there, buried in the middle of it all, was Victor's name. Again and again, my mind kept circling back to it. Who the hell was he? What was his role in this? I ran a hand through my hair, trying to focus. This wasn't just about getting the money back. This was about something much bigger. Something that was slowly unraveling, piece by piece. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I didn't know where to begin. We couldn't just keep digging through the records without a plan. We had to find Victor. Josh, I said, my voice firm, we need to find out everything we can about him. I want to know who he is, what he does, everything. This guy's the key to all of this. I can feel it. Josh looked up from the laptop and met my eyes, his face grim. I know, Dad. I've been looking into him. But it's not easy, there's not much out there. I think he's hiding something. But I found an address, a business address, connected to his name. My heart skipped a beat. An address? Are you sure? He nodded. Yeah. I don't know if it's a real business, but it's worth checking out. It's in the city about 10 miles from here. A chill ran down my spine. I wasn't sure what we were walking into, but I knew we couldn't just ignore it. This was the break we needed, the first solid lead we'd had. I felt a mixture of dread and anticipation building in my chest. We had to be smart. We had to be careful. But I wasn't going to back down now. Not when Josh's future and mine was at stake. I stood up, pacing the small living room as I processed the next steps. All right, I said, the words coming out with more force than I'd intended. We need to go there. We'll drive by, check it out. We're not walking in without knowing what's really going on. Josh hesitated for a moment, then nodded. You're right. He stopped himself, his eyes flickering to the laptop screen again, a look of uncertainty crossing his face. What if it's a trap? What if we're walking into something bad? I paused. Then we get the hell out of there, no risks. But we have to find out more, Josh. We have no choice. I grabbed my jacket, throwing it on as I headed for the door. The world outside felt suddenly distant, like it was moving too fast, while I was stuck in this nightmare. Rachel had been hiding something from me for months, maybe longer. The lies were starting to pile up, and now there was Victor. lurking in the background like a shadow. I had no idea what he wanted, but I knew we had to find out. Josh followed me, and for the first time since everything started to fall apart, I felt like we were doing something. We were getting closer to the truth. But the fear gnawing at the back of my mind wouldn't let go. What if it was worse than we thought? What if Victor wasn't just some guy Rachel had gotten mixed up with? What if this was something criminal? We got in the car, and I started the engine, the hum of the motor the only sound in the quiet of the night. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that someone knew we were coming. But there was no turning back now. We were in this together, and we were going to get to the bottom of it. As we drove through the streets, the city lights blurring in the rearview mirror, I could feel the weight of the past few hours pressing down on me. Rachel's betrayal was only the beginning of something much darker, and whatever it was, I was about to find out. We drove in silence, the hum of the engine the only sound between us. I could feel the tension thick in the air. Josh sat next to me, his eyes fixed on the road ahead, his mind clearly still on what we'd just uncovered. We were headed to that address. The one that might hold the answers we'd been desperately searching for. A part of me still didn't want to believe this was real. A part of me wanted to wake up from this nightmare, to pretend that everything was just some horrible mistake. But the name Victor kept echoing in my mind, and Josh had found that address. So there was no denying it anymore. We were in it, all the way. As we got closer, my stomach churned. The city lights flickered in the distance, the streets growing darker, the buildings taller. We were now entering a neighborhood I hadn't seen before. It felt wrong, like we were driving through some forgotten part of Chicago that no one cared about anymore. The kinds of places where people go to hide, to disappear. My grip on the steering wheel tightened as I glanced over at Josh. His face was set in that expression I knew too well, focused, determined, but underneath it, I saw that flicker of fear. "Dad, do you really think this guy is involved?" Josh's voice cut through the silence, soft but steady. I could hear the doubt in it, but I could also hear something else, curiosity, and maybe even a little fear. He wasn't saying it out loud, but I knew he was scared. This was no longer just about a college fund. It was about something much bigger. And we were about to find out just how deep it went. I glanced over at him before answering. "I don't know, Josh. But what I do know is that we have to find out. If Victor's connected to all this, if he's somehow involved with Rachel, then we need to know what kind of person we're dealing with." I paused, trying to put the words together. We need to be smart, though. We don't walk in blind. We don't take any chances. We turned a corner, and there it was. The building. It looked like nothing special, just another old warehouse or office building, tucked away between two rundown shops. The kind of place that wouldn't raise any red flags. But the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. There was something about this place that felt wrong. Something that didn't sit right. I parked the car a block away, not wanting to get too close. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I looked at the building. It didn't make sense. It was just an address. But this was the first real lead we'd had. This was the one thing that could make everything fall into place, or tear it all apart. "Okay," I said, turning to Josh, my voice a little firmer than I felt. "We walk in, get what we can, and get out. Fast. If anything looks off, we leave. No arguments." "Understood." Josh nodded, his face pale but resolute. "Got it." I couldn't help but admire him. He was my son, no question about it. Smart, resourceful, brave. But this wasn't a school project. This wasn't something that could be solved by looking up some numbers on the internet. This was real, and it was dangerous. We walked toward the building, our footsteps echoing in the empty street. The closer we got, the more I felt the weight of the moment pressing down on me. This wasn't just some random lead. This was it. The point of no return. If we found something here, if we found something that tied Rachel to all this, I wasn't sure how we'd handle it. Could we trust her? Could we ever look at her the same way again? We reached the entrance, a door that looked like it hadn't been touched in years. No lights, no signs, no anything. Just a dirty door with a rusty handle. The air was heavy, like the place had been abandoned for too long. But something told me it wasn't abandoned at all. I pushed the door open, the sound of it creaking in the silence. The inside of the building was dim, with just a few flickering lights overhead. The walls were bare, The floor covered in dust, like no one had bothered to clean up in months. But there were signs that someone had been here. Cables running along the walls, boxes stacked in the corners, things that shouldn't be here. "Stay close," I whispered to Josh. He nodded without a word, staying right beside me as we made our way through the warehouse. My mind raced with every step we took. Was this the place Rachel had been hiding? Was this where the money had gone? Every part of me wanted to turn around and leave, but I couldn't. Not now. We walked past row after row of empty crates and broken furniture. And then, just as I thought we were wasting our time, I spotted something. A desk, pushed into the far corner of the room. A chair. And sitting on the desk was a laptop. A laptop that didn't look like it belonged here. "Josh," I whispered. "Stay here." I approached the desk slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it. The moment I had been dreading. I reached for the laptop, and just as I was about to open it, I froze. A door at the far end of the room creaked open. Footsteps. Heavy. Fast. I felt my blood run cold. We weren't alone. I turned to Josh, but before I could say anything, I saw the shadow moving toward us. The footsteps grew louder, heavier with each passing second, and I froze. My heart raced, the sound of it pounding in my ears. I turned slowly, every muscle in my body tense, trying to brace for whatever was coming. The shadow moved closer, but I couldn't see who it was not yet. I held my breath, hoping like hell that whoever it was wouldn't spot us in the dim light of the warehouse. "Josh," I whispered, not taking my eyes off the figure in the distance. "Get behind me. Stay quiet." I didn't know who it was. Maybe it was just someone coming to check on the place. Maybe it was someone who had no idea we were here. But deep down, I felt something was off. My gut was telling me this wasn't just some random person. This was something bigger, something connected to Rachel. And that laptop on the desk? It wasn't supposed to be here. Josh moved quickly, silently, sliding behind me as I kept my gaze locked on the figure. I couldn't risk being seen. Not now. Not when we were so close to finding out the truth. My fingers itched to grab the laptop and get the hell out of here. But something told me that rushing would be the worst mistake I could make. The footsteps stopped just a few feet away from us, and I held my breath. I could hear someone breathing, heavy, as if they were trying to stay quiet too. I didn't move, didn't dare make a sound, praying that whoever it was would turn around and walk away. But instead, the person stepped closer, and that's when I saw him. A man in a dark jacket, his face partially hidden under the hood of his sweatshirt. The shadows obscured his features, but there was no mistaking the way he moved, slow, deliberate, like he knew exactly where he was going. I could feel my pulse quicken as he reached the desk where the laptop was sitting. He wasn't alone. A second person stepped out from the shadows, this time a woman, dressed in similar dark clothing. Her presence sent a chill down my spine. These weren't just random people. They were connected to whatever Rachel had gotten herself wrapped up in. I leaned back against the wall, trying to make myself as small as possible. I couldn't let them see us. If they caught us here, we were screwed. The man picked up the laptop and quickly flipped it open, his fingers moving across the keyboard with quick precision. The woman stood beside him, watching intently, her eyes scanning the room like she was expecting someone. Maybe even us. I looked over at Josh, who was standing frozen, his eyes wide with fear. I had to keep him calm. "Stay down," I whispered, my voice tight. "We're not out of here yet." The tension in the air was suffocating. And every second felt like an eternity. I could see the man typing furiously, his face hard as he worked. I didn't know what he was looking for, but I didn't have to guess long. He was accessing something important. I could feel it. The woman glanced toward the door, her eyes narrowing as if she heard something. My heart skipped a beat. She was looking this way. But she didn't seem to notice us, thank God. I could feel the sweat on my forehead, the anxiety building up inside me. I had no idea how much time we had before they figured out we weren't supposed to be here. What if they found us? What if they knew we were connected to Rachel? There were too many unknowns, and it was driving me crazy. But I had to focus. I had to stay calm for Josh. We couldn't mess this up. Just as the man slammed the laptop shut, my hand instinctively reached for the door behind me. I wasn't sure what I was thinking. Maybe I was ready to make a run for it, but I wasn't sure if I had the guts to. I kept telling myself to stay still, to be patient, but every fiber of my being wanted to bolt. The woman turned sharply, her eyes locking on me for a split second, but just before she could make a move, the man grabbed her arm, pulling her back toward the corner. "We need to go," he muttered, his voice low but urgent. I didn't need to be told twice. The second they started walking away, I motioned for Josh to follow me, and we slipped silently through the shadows, careful not to make a sound. The tension in my chest was almost unbearable, but somehow, we made it out. I couldn't believe we got away with it. As we stepped out into the cool night air, the weight of what we had just witnessed hit me all at once. My mind was reeling. Whoever those people were, they were tangled up in this mess with Rachel. They were connected to Victor. And now, we had to figure out just how deep this rabbit hole went. I looked over at Josh, who was still in shock, his face pale. "You okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He nodded slowly. "Yeah. But what now, Dad? What do we do next?" I didn't have an answer. But I knew one thing for sure: we weren't going to stop until we uncovered the whole truth. No matter what it took. We got back to the car as quickly as we could, both of us breathing hard, like we had just run a marathon. I could feel my heart still pounding in my chest, the adrenaline coursing through me. But the worst part was the silence. The kind that drapes itself over everything, making it hard to think, hard to breathe. The weight of what we had just witnessed was pressing down on me, and I could see Josh in the rearview mirror, still processing everything, his face pale and tight with confusion and fear. I put the car in gear and started driving, but my mind was racing in a million directions at once. What had we just stumbled onto? That building, those people, we were this close to being caught. If they had found us, I don't even want to think about what might have happened. My fingers tightened on the steering wheel, the knuckles white. And yet, despite the fear, there was something else. A sense of urgency. We had uncovered something big. Something that tied Rachel to all of this. Victor. Whoever he was at the center of it all, and that laptop. I couldn't shake the thought of what was on it. I had to keep it together. For Josh. He was still so young, but seeing him so focused, so determined to help, it scared me. This was way bigger than anything he should have been dealing with. But there was no turning back now. We were in it. All of it. "Dad," Josh said quietly, breaking the silence. "What do we do now?" His voice was low, almost hesitant, like he wasn't sure if he should even be asking. The words hung in the air, heavy with expectation. I glanced at him, trying to gauge where his head was at. He'd been quiet since we left the building, his face a mask of thought. He was processing it all, just like I was. I took a deep breath, my fingers flexing against the wheel. "I don't know, buddy. But I do know one thing. We need to figure out who Victor is. And we need to figure out what Rachel's gotten herself into." Josh didn't say anything for a long while, just stared out the window, his reflection in the glass a mix of concern and determination. I could see the wheels turning in his head. He was smart, too smart for his age. But this was something no kid should have to deal with. We passed the familiar streets of the city, but I wasn't looking at the city anymore. My thoughts were still on the building, on that damn laptop. There was no way Rachel was involved in this without knowing what she was getting into. But why? Why would she do this? Why would she risk everything for a guy like Victor? And what the hell was that laptop connected to? The question gnawed at me. Finally, Josh spoke up again, his voice a little stronger this time. "I think I can find something about Victor online. Maybe I can dig into his background, figure out who he really is." He hesitated for a moment, then added, "But we need to be careful, right?" "Yeah," I said, my voice tight with the weight of it all. "We need to be smart. This isn't just about the money anymore, Josh. We're getting close to something serious, and I don't know what kind of people we're dealing with. We need to know who we're up against." Josh nodded, his jaw set in that way that made him look a little older, a little more grown up. He wasn't just a kid anymore, not after tonight. I pulled over to a quiet part of the city, trying to find a place to park where we wouldn't be noticed. The streets were quieter now, the glow of streetlights casting long shadows across the pavement. I looked around, trying to shake off the sense that we were being followed. But the streets were empty. Too empty. We got out of the car and walked to the nearby diner, not saying much, just trying to keep our heads low. It wasn't that I thought someone was following us, at least. I didn't want to believe that. But something about all of this felt off. The building, the people, the way everything was falling into place too perfectly. I couldn't let my guard down, not now. Inside the diner, the warmth hit me like a punch to the chest, but it wasn't enough to shake off the coldness that had settled inside me. We sat down at a booth, the sticky vinyl of the seat sticking to my jacket. Josh pulled out his phone and started typing, his eyes scanning the screen as he searched for Victor's name. I watched him, my stomach still tight with worry. "Anything?" I asked, my voice betraying the tension. I was trying to hide. He shook his head. "Nothing yet, but I'm looking at a few things. He's gotta have some kind of record, right? I mean, people like this, they don't just vanish." I nodded. But the silence that followed felt like it was swallowing us whole. We were searching for answers, but I had no idea where to find them. And I couldn't help but wonder, what if we weren't meant to find them? What if this whole thing was bigger than we could handle? Suddenly, Josh's phone buzzed, and he looked up, his eyes wide. "I found something," he said, his voice tight with excitement. "I think I found his business." My pulse quickened. "What kind of business?" He glanced at me before turning the phone toward me. It was a website, slick, professional. The kind of thing you'd expect from someone who was in this for the long haul. "Looks like it's tied to some kind of shell company," Josh said, his voice full of disbelief. "This guy's laundering money. Dad, this isn't just about taking the college fund. This is big." My heart sank. This was bigger than I'd ever imagined. We had stumbled onto something far deeper, something dangerous. And now there was no turning back. I could feel the weight of the moment as we sat in that diner, staring at the phone screen like it was the key to unlocking everything. Josh was still processing what we'd just found: Victor's name, the business, the shady dealings that were quickly spiraling into something far more dangerous than I'd imagined. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I was trying to keep my breathing steady, but everything was moving too fast. We were in over our heads. This wasn't just about the missing money anymore. It wasn't even about Rachel. It was about something much bigger, and I had no idea how deep it went. Josh looked up from the phone, his face pale but determined. "Dad, I think we've got a real problem here. This guy, Victor's not just some small-time con artist. He's connected to a whole network. There's money laundering, fraudulent businesses, and..." He stopped, his eyes wide with disbelief. "This is huge." I could feel my stomach drop. I wanted to deny it, to tell him he was wrong, that we were misinterpreting something. But deep down, I knew he was right. Everything we'd uncovered, the shady transactions, the shell companies, the mystery surrounding Rachel, it was all part of a much bigger operation. And we had just stumbled right into the middle of it. I looked around the diner, trying to shake off the feeling that we were being watched. The place was quiet, almost too quiet, but my mind kept racing. I needed to think, to make sense of all of this. "What do we do now?" I asked Josh, my voice low, but there was a tinge of desperation in it. I had no answers. Not anymore. Josh didn't hesitate. He looked down at the phone again, his fingers moving quickly as he scrolled through more information. "I've been looking at the addresses linked to Victor's businesses. There's one in the city that stands out. It's an office building near the financial district. I don't think it's just a front. I think he's actually using it for more than that." My mind raced, trying to piece everything together. This office building. I had to see it. I had to get a look at what we were dealing with before we made any more moves. But at the same time, fear gnawed at the back of my mind. What if we were walking into a trap? What if this was all part of Victor's game, and we were just pawns in it? "All right," I said, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "We're going to check this out. But we do it smart. We don't go in blind. We stay low. No sudden moves." Josh nodded, his expression serious. "Got it, Dad. But we have to do something. If we let this go, Rachel's in even deeper trouble." The weight of his words hung in the air between us. Rachel. God, I didn't even know where to begin with her anymore. I couldn't figure out if she was being manipulated by Victor, or if she was in on this from the start. Either way, it didn't matter. We couldn't let it slide. This was about more than just money. This was about everything we'd built, everything I'd promised Josh. I wasn't going to let that go without a fight. We paid the bill, got back into the car, and headed toward the city. The street seemed quieter now, but my nerves were shot. Every corner we turned, every shadow that passed by, I felt like someone was watching us. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being followed. Maybe it was just paranoia, but I wasn't taking any chances. If Victor was as connected as Josh's research suggested, we could be dealing with something far more dangerous than I ever imagined. The closer we got to the financial district, the tighter my chest felt. This was it. This was the moment that everything would either fall into place or come crashing down. I pulled into a parking garage a few blocks away from the office building, taking a deep breath. I didn't know what we'd find, but I knew we had to see it for ourselves. We got out of the car and started walking toward the building, the city streets bustling around us. But all I could focus on was the building in front of me. It was an old structure, nothing special at first glance, but there was something about it that sent a chill down my spine. Maybe it was just the nerves, or maybe it was the fact that we were walking into a potential hornet's nest. Either way, I wasn't going to back down. Josh stayed close to me, his eyes scanning the area as we approached the front door. The building looked empty, the windows dark, but I knew better than to trust appearances. I pushed the door open slowly, the old brass handle creaking as it turned. Inside, the lobby was quiet, the air thick with dust. But there was still something off about it. It felt like we weren't supposed to be there. "Let's take a look around," I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. Josh nodded, his hand resting on the doorframe as he looked around. The tension in the air was almost suffocating, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I glanced over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone following us. But there was no one there. Not yet, anyway. We moved through the lobby, our footsteps muffled by the carpet, careful not to draw attention. We didn't know who was in here, or what we might find. But we were going to find out. We had to. Suddenly, a door creaked open down the hall. My heart skipped a beat. I froze, holding my breath. Was it just someone coming and going? Or was this the moment everything went to hell? The door creaked open again, and this time, I couldn't stay still. My breath caught in my throat as I turned to Josh, a warning in my eyes. He froze, his gaze darting to the sound. We didn't move, not a muscle, as I strained to hear any footsteps, any sounds that would tell me what was coming. The hallway in front of us was dimly lit, shadows hanging heavy in the air, and the silence felt deafening. Was it a guard, a worker, or something worse? "Stay quiet," I whispered under my breath, barely moving my lips. Josh nodded, his face pale, but his eyes were sharp. He was ready, just like I was. We both knew that whatever was going on, we were walking a thin line now. If we got caught here, it could get ugly. Fast. I took a deep breath, and, with slow, deliberate steps, moved to the side, closer to the wall, pulling Josh with me. The sound of the door had faded now, but I wasn't about to risk being seen. I felt my pulse in my throat, each beat pounding louder than the last. The anxiety was a weight pressing down on my chest, but there was no room for hesitation. I needed to keep moving, needed to keep us safe. We crept down the hallway, sticking to the shadows, trying to make as little noise as possible. The building seemed abandoned, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every creak of the floorboard beneath our feet, every breath we took felt like it might give us away. I glanced at Josh, and he was right there with me, moving with the same urgency, the same need to get to the truth, no matter what it cost us. The hallway stretched on ahead, the dim light flickering above us, casting long, eerie shadows. I kept my hand close to my waist, where I usually carried a small pocket knife. I didn't want to think about what might happen if we were discovered, but I couldn't ignore the reality. We were out of our depth. And then, I heard it. A footstep, just one, coming from behind us. It was faint, but it was enough to stop me in my tracks. My heart slammed in my chest. I looked at Josh, silently telling him to stay still, to be quiet. The sound was getting closer. I wanted to turn and run, but I knew better than that. Running would only draw more attention. I needed to stay calm, stay hidden. My hands were shaking now, but I had to keep my cool. We had to keep moving. I slowly turned, pushing Josh gently toward a nearby door that looked like it might lead to a side room. We had no idea what was on the other side, but at this point, anywhere was better than standing in the open. The door creaked as I pushed it open, but there was no turning back. I glanced over my shoulder just in time to see a figure moving down the hallway, a silhouette outlined by the faint light from behind. My stomach dropped. We couldn't let him see us. We couldn't get caught. I pushed the door the rest of the way open and slipped inside, motioning for Josh to follow. He was right behind me, moving fast, but careful not to make a sound. We found ourselves in a small, dark room. The air smelled stale, and the only sound was our own breathing, harsh and uneven. I pressed my back against the wall, trying to steady myself. There was a window on the far side of the room, but it was too high to reach, too small to climb out of. There was no way out of this room without being seen. I looked at Josh again, and for the first time, I saw the same fear in his eyes that I was feeling. He was scared. I couldn't blame him. I was scared too. But I had to keep it together. I had to be the one to lead us through this. For him, for us both. I heard the footsteps again, louder this time. Whoever it was getting closer, and I had no idea what they wanted, but it was clear we didn't belong here. We couldn't let them find us. Not now, not when we were so close to figuring it all out. My mind raced, trying to think of a plan, any plan. The door we'd come through was still open a crack, and I could see the outline of the figure moving closer. I didn't have time to think. I turned to Josh, my voice barely above a whisper. Get ready. If we have to run, we do it now. We can't stay here. Josh nodded, his jaw tight with determination. He didn't want to run. He was ready for whatever was coming. But I could see the doubt in his eyes. He was still a kid, and this was way too much for him. But I wasn't going to let him down. Not like this. As the footsteps drew closer, my heart rate picked up again. This was it. We were running out of time. I braced myself, waiting for the moment when we would either make a break for it, or be caught. There was no way to know which would come first. But either way, we were ready. The figure was almost at the door now, and I could feel the tension in my chest, choking me. It felt like the whole world was holding its breath. Then, just as the door started to creak open, I made my move. I grabbed Josh by the arm and pulled him towards the back of the room, hiding behind a stack of old crates. We huddled there, barely breathing, as the door opened just enough for a man to step inside. He stood there for a moment, scanning the room, and my heart stopped. But then, just as quickly as he'd appeared, he turned and walked back out, the door swinging shut behind him. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. That was too close. We couldn't keep playing this game of cat and mouse. But we had survived for now. The danger hadn't passed, but we had one more chance to find the answers we needed. We had to keep moving, keep digging. There was no turning back now. We didn't move for a long time after the man left the room. My body was frozen in place, pressed against the crates, and I could feel Josh's breath on my neck, his silence as loud as my own. The door had creaked, and for a moment, I thought we were done. But the man had passed through without so much as a second glance. We got lucky. It wasn't over though. It couldn't be. I couldn't let myself believe that. I had to keep moving. I had to keep my head clear, keep my instincts sharp. We were this far into it. If we backed down now, I'd never be able to live with myself. The seconds dragged on, each one heavier than the last, and the silence between us was suffocating. I could still feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins. My heart was still pounding in my chest, and I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to catch my breath anytime soon. Josh shifted next to me, and I could feel him tense up. I wasn't sure if it was from fear, or from the same anticipation gnawing at me. But I didn't have time to ask. I slowly eased myself away from the crates, one careful movement at a time. My eyes never left the door. Every fiber of my being was screaming at me to stay still, to wait it out. But that wasn't an option anymore. We had found something real, and we were getting closer to the truth. I just had to trust that we could finish this without getting caught. I wasn't about to leave until I knew everything. Josh followed my lead, moving just as quietly. I motioned for him to stay close as we eased through the shadows of the room. I wasn't sure how much longer we could keep this up, but I wasn't ready to call it quits. I could feel it in my gut that this was bigger than anything I'd imagined. I could feel the weight of it pressing down on me, but I knew we had to push forward. We made our way back toward the door, the one we'd slipped in through. My hand shook as I reached for the handle. This was it, the moment of truth. I glanced back at Josh. His eyes were wide, his face pale, but his resolve was still there. He was with me. We were in this together, and there was no going back now. I cracked the door open just enough to peer out into the hallway. The coast was clear at least, for now. The place was still eerily quiet. Too quiet. But I didn't let myself think about that. I had a job to do. And the longer we waited, the more time we were wasting. We slipped back out into the hallway, the floor creaking under our weight. I kept my movements slow, deliberate, not wanting to attract any attention. I glanced over at Josh. His eyes were locked on me, but his body was stiff, like he was expecting someone to pop out from the shadows at any second. I couldn't blame him. I was waiting for that too. We made our way back to the stairs, moving as quickly as we dared. Every step felt like it took us deeper into a maze of lies and deception, but we couldn't stop now. I didn't know how much longer we had before someone realized we were here, but we had to take this one step at a time. I couldn't let my mind wander, couldn't let myself get distracted. I had to stay focused on the endgame. We reached the exit at the bottom of the stairs, the door just ahead. My mind was racing, but I had a clear goal in sight now. We were going to make it out of here. We were going to find out everything. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was going to be worth it. I could already taste the bitter satisfaction of bringing the truth to light, of exposing everything Rachel had tried to hide. But as I reached for the door handle, something stopped me. A feeling. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up. The unmistakable sensation that someone was watching us. My stomach dropped. I turned just in time to see the figure of a man standing at the top of the stairs. It wasn't the same guy as before, but the look in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. He knew we were here. He wasn't here to ask questions. He was here to stop us. My heart skipped a beat. I could feel the adrenaline surge through my veins again, but this time it was different. This wasn't the adrenaline of the hunt. This was the adrenaline of pure panic. We were cornered. There was nowhere to go. The man started moving down the stairs, slow, deliberate, like he was enjoying the moment. I didn't wait around to find out what he had planned. I grabbed Josh's arm and yanked him toward the door. "Run!" I shouted, my voice hoarse with panic. We slammed through the door, the sound of it crashing against the wall echoing down the hallway. I didn't look back. I couldn't. We had no time. I heard the man's footsteps behind us, closer now. We sprinted down the street, my lungs burning, but I couldn't stop. Not until we were far enough away. My mind was racing, trying to process everything that had happened in the last hour. We were running on instinct now, no plan, no backup. Just us against whatever Victor and his people were throwing at us. We didn't know who we could trust, and we didn't know how far this thing went. But one thing was clear, we were in this for the long haul. We weren't stopping until we had the answers. We weren't stopping until Rachel's betrayal was exposed for good. And as we disappeared into the night, I knew one thing, this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. This is where things take a turn that will shock you. I thought I knew who was behind everything. But what I found next was beyond anything I imagined. If I had acted sooner, would I have stopped it all? Could I have saved everything that was slipping away? The final revelation will blow your mind. Keep watching until the end, to discover what really happened. And trust me, you don't want to miss the twist. The lesson here is clear. Trust can be shattered in an instant. And when it is, the consequences ripple through everything you've worked for. Always protect what matters, whether it's your family, your finances, or your future. Never let your guard down, and never assume someone will have your back, even if they once did. This isn't just about betrayal, it's about being prepared for the unexpected. Take control of your life, stay vigilant and safeguard what's important. Don't wait until it's too late to take action.